My dear brothers and sisters in the risen Lord, October 4, the feast of St. Francis of Assisi from 1182 to 1226. Happy feast day to all of you Capuchins, Franciscan, and religious sisters who follow the charism of St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis of Assisi was a saint after the heart of Jesus. One winter's day, as St. Francis of Assisi was journeying from Perugia, suffering from severe cold, he said, "Brother Leo, although the friars minors give good example of holiness and edification, nevertheless write and note down diligently that perfect joy is not to be found therein." And St. Francis went a little further on his way and said, "Oh, Brother Leo, even though the friars minor give sight to the blind, make the crooked straight, cast out devils, make the deaf hear and the lame walk, and raise to life those who had lain 4 days in the grave, right. Perfect joy is never found therein." He went a little further on and shouted, "Brother Leo, if the friars minor knew all the tongues and the sciences and all the scriptures, so that they foretell and reveal not only the future things, but even the secrets of the conscience of the soul, right. Perfect joy is not therein." St. Francis continued such a talk for 2 more miles. Then Brother Leo asked him, "Father, I pray in God's name, tell me wherein perfect joy lies." Then St. Francis answered, "When we are come to St. Mary of the Angels, then the Franciscan chapel in Assisi, wet through with rain, frozen and cold, foul with mire, and tormented with hunger, and when we knock at the door, and the doorkeeper comes in a rage and says, 'Who are you?' And we say, 'We are 2 of your friars.' And he answers, 'You lie. You are rather 2 knaves who go about deceiving the world and stealing the alms of the poor. Be gone.' And he opens not to us and makes us stay outside, hungry and cold all night in the rain and snow. Then if you endure patiently and charitable, that it is God who made the doorkeeper reign against us, O Friar Leo, right. There is perfect joy." Then St. Francis continued again, "And if constrained by hunger and cold, we knock the door again, and he comes and washes us black and blue and leaves us outside hungry and in agony. If we, thinking on the agony of the blessed Christ, endure all these things patiently and joyfully for love of Him, right. O brother Leo, that here and in this is found perfect joy. Today we celebrate the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. He is a saint after the hearts of Jesus. The saint who lived like that. A saint who lived like Christ. The humility, sanctity, and poverty of St. Francis had earned him the name Another Christ, less not. 1. St. Francis' early life and conversion. John Bernardin was born in John Bernardone was born in 1182 at Assisi in Italy to a wealthy merchant Peter Bernardone, who did much business in France and to Pica, a French girl. When Peter Bernardone returned from another trip to France, he found that a son was born to him, and he changed his name to Francis, apparently as a tribute to his French wife. Francis learned Italian and French from his parents and Latin from his parish priest. He had no further schooling. He entered his father's business, but he was better in spending money than at earning it. In 1202, he fought in the Assisian army against Perugia and was taken a prisoner. He spent 1 year in reflective captivity. After his release, one day, wearing a new suit, he was riding a horse and he saw a leper on the road. The sight was so repulsive that he recoiled at it. Overcoming his initial revulsion, he alighted from his horse, and as the beggar stretched out his hands for alms, he embraced him and kissed his wound tenderly. Desiring to follow Christ more perfectly, he made a pilgrimage to Rome to visit the tombs of the apostles. At St. Peter's Church, when he found a multitude of beggars, he exchanged his clothes with a more deserving beggar and stood a whole day like a beggar among the other beggars. In February 1207, when he was praying before the crucifix in St. Damian's church, he heard Christ speaking thrice to him from the cross, "Francis, go and repair my house which you see falling." Francis went home, took a house load of clothes from his father's warehouse and sold it with the horse at Bologna, a town 12 miles from Assisi. The old priest at St. Damian's church accepted Francis but would not accept the money, and so Francis deposited the money on the window. His father went into a rage when he heard what his son had done, and he rushed to the church in search of his son. Francis hid himself, and his father's anger was soothed when he found his money on the window. After few years, when Francis appeared in public, due to severe fasting and praying, he looked thin and pale. He was so poorly clad that the urchins in the street pelted stone at him and cried out, "Bazu, Bazu, a madman, a madman." When his father found him in that state, he dragged him home and chained him in the house. But his mother set him free when his father was away. Francis returned to the church at St. Damien. Francis' father rushed to the church and demanded that either his son return home or publicly renounce any claim to inheritance. The matter was brought before the tribunal of Bishop Guido, the bishop in the Pisa Santa Maria Maggiore. When the instruction of the renunciation were being drawn up, Francis entered the adjacent room. And a little later returned almost naked. Placing his clothes and the little money he had before his father, he said, "Hitherto I called you Benedoni, the Father on earth, but now I say with more confidence, Our Father who art in heaven, in whom I place all my hope and treasure." As his father took his clothes and the money and went away, the bishop covered Francis with his own mantle. Francis went back to the church of St. Damien. He begged his food from the door to door. He begged his food from door to door and began to build the dilapidated church of St. Damien with his own hands. St. Francis' dedication to Christ. In 1209, when Francis was attending Mass, he was struck by the Gospel reading of the day, where Christ instructs his disciples, "As you go, proclaim good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment. Take no gold or silver or copper in your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics, or sandals, or a staff." Matthew chapter 10, verse 7 to 19. Francis applied this gospel to himself literally and decided to preach the gospel and possess nothing. Then he went into the city squares of Assisi and nearby towns and villages and preached the gospel of poverty and Christ. 12 men taken up by his zeal and piety joined him. They made brown robes for themselves and built cabins of branches and boughs to dwell. They went to the nearby towns and villages to preach the gospel, and they were poorly clad and were barefoot. When they returned, Francis washed their feet and gave them food. Wherever they went, they greeted everyone. "The Lord gives thee peace." They called themselves friars minors. Friars meaning brothers, and minor meaning the least of Christ's servants. Very few of them were ordained, And even St. Francis was never more than a deacon all through his life. St. Francis had a great love for the poor. He could not see anyone poorer than himself. He often exchanged his dress with the beggars. Once he was returning from Siena, when he came across a poor man on the way, he said to his fellow monk, "We ought to return this mantle to its owner, for we received it only as a loan, until we should come upon one poorer than ourselves. It would be counted to us as a theft if we should not give it to him who is more needy." St. Francis' love for man overflowed to animals, plants, and even to inanimate things. He called his body as brother as because he was to carry burdens. He called the sun and the fire as brothers, the birds as sisters, and he even addressed death as sister death. He felt a sensitive kinship with the whole creation. St. Francis as the fount. In 1210, with his 12 followers, Bernard of Quintavalli, Peter of Catana, Giles, Sylvester, Morico, Barbero, Lapacino, Bernard of Viridanti, John of San Constanzo, Angelo Credi, Philip the Tall, and John of the Capella. St. Francis went to Rome seeking an audience with the Pope. With the recommendation of Bishop Guido of Assisi and Cardinal John Colonna, he got an audience with the Pope Innocent III. Francis spoke vehemently, saying that he and his 12 companions were at the service of the Christ, and they wished to lead lives based on the gospel values, especially poverty. And for their guiding principles, he quoted 3 scriptural verses, Matthew chapter 19:21. "If you wish to be perfect, go sell your possession and give the money to the poor." Luke chapter 9:3. "Take nothing for your journey, no staff, no bag, nor bread, nor money, not even an extra tunic." And Matthew chapter 16 verse 24. "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take their crosses and follow me." Moved by his simplicity, sincerity, and zeal, Pope Innocent III knew that God had answered his prayers and had cleared his previous night's dream, in which he saw the Lateran Basilica, the mother of Church of Christendom, tottering to his wall. But there came a man sent by Christ Jesus, who learned to Christ the humbling walls and prevented their collapse. His appearance and his clothes resembled the man who, now stood before him in the person of Francis. After listening to Francis, the Pope came down from his throne and embraced him. He said to him, "Go with God, my brethren. Preach penance as the Lord inspires you. And when the Almighty had called you to increase and multiply, come back to me, and I will grant you still more than I have done today." Having got the verbal approval of the Pope for his order, Francis went back to his hometown. The Benedictines of Mount Sebastian near Assisi gave them the chapel of St. Mary of the Angels. It was so small, some 10 feet long, that it came to be called Porciancula, Little Portion. The friars built their huts around this chapel, and thus the first order of St. Francis started. New members soon joined them, and the order multiplied and increased. In 1212, a wealthy girl of 18 years old, Clara de Siffi, joined Francis and asked him the permission to start the second order for women. Later, she became the abbess of the Franciscan convent, which was built around the chapel of St. Damien. In 1222, a third order of St. Francis, the Tertians, was formed among the laymen who wished to obey the Franciscan rule as much as possible. In 1220, his friars numbered about 5,000, spread over many European countries. Francis drew up a new rule and got it approved with some modification in 1223 by Pope Honorius III. St. Francis' desire for martyrdom. The Passion of Christ was the principal object of St. Francis' devotion, and in his meditations on it, he often could not control his tears. In the beginning of his spiritual life, one day, when he was praying before the crucifix, he beheld Christ hanging upon the cross, and he was so affected by that vision that from then he never meditated upon Christ's passion without shedding tears. Due to his love for Christ, he was desirous of shedding his blood for him. He made 3 attempts to preach the gospel to the Muslims, and thus tried to court martyrdom. In 1212, he set out for Syria, but a storm defeated his plans, and he was forced to land on the coast of Dalmatia. In 1214, he set his sail to Morocco in order to preach the gospel and convert the famous Muslim king Meramolin, but he became very sick and had to be detained at Spain. The third attempt he made in 1219, when he sailed to Egypt and landed at Dalmatia on the Nile Delta. After preaching for several months to the Crusades army, St. Francis with brother Illuminatus walked over to the enemy's line, chanting this verse from the Psalm 22. Even though I be in the shadow of death, I shall fear nothing. Lord, for you are with me. When the Muslim soldiers sung these two prayers, they rushed toward them. Sultan, Sultan, cried Francis at the top of his voice, thinking that these two men had come for a truce. They chained them and took them to the Sultan. Malik el-Kamil was the Sultan of Egypt, and he threw wooden crosses upon the carpet before meeting these two friars, so that they had to tread upon these sacred symbols before meeting him. Francis trampled upon them without any hesitation. "Gracious me," cried the Sultan, "you trample upon the cross of Christ." Francis replied, "Do you not know that on Calvary there were 3 crosses, one for Christ and 2 for the thieves? We adore the one. You can have the other 2, but if you care to strew them on the ground, why should we hesitate to trample upon them?" After this brief introduction, Francis and the Sultan were very soon on friendly terms. The Sultan even invited Francis to stay longer with him, which he declined. To prove the superiority of his faith, Francis even challenged the Sultan to heat a large oven and called upon the Muslim priest to enter into the burning oven along with him and see who comes out unscathed. The Sultan replied that his priest would not dare to enter into the oven. "Then I will enter," replied Francis, "and if I die, put it down against my sins. But if I come out unscathed, will you recognize Christ as true God and Savior?" The Sultan hesitated to enter into such a challenge. The Sultan wanted to load him with gifts, but Francis refused them. Malik el-Kamil, the Sultan, escorted those 2 friars back to the Crusaders' camp with every mark of respect. On taking leave of Francis, he said, "Do not forget me in your prayers, and may God, through your intercession, reveal to me the faith that is most pleasing in his sight." St. Francis' last days. In 1215, Count Orlando of Catania had built a convent and a church for the friar miners on the Mount Alverna, and Francis often retreated to this solitary place for his prayers. It was here on this mountain, when he was in deep contemplation, that he had many visions and mystical experiences. On 14th September 1224, the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross, when he was deep in prayer on the Mount Alverna, Francis saw an angel with 6 wings and there appeared between his wings the figure of a man crucified, with his hands and feet stretched out and fastened to the cross. After this vision, when he came to his senses, he found his hands, feet, and the side of his body bleeding. The Lord had imprinted his 5 wounds, the stigmata, on his body. The next 2 years, Francis carried those sacred wounds, and he often hid them with his long habit. His last days were filled with the physical sufferings. Almost blind and exhausted with the frequent sickness, his life was filled with the bodily sufferings, but he was still very cheerful. When he was under this intense suffering, then he composed this beautiful hymn, Canticle to the Sun. As his agony neared its end, he asked his followers to carry him to St. Mary of the Angels Church, which reminded him of his earlier days. As they carried him down the mountain one last time, he blessed Assisi. Then he asked Brother Angelo and Brother Leo to sing for him his candle, in which he had added the stanza addressed to our sister Death. On Saturday, 3rd October 1226, he intoned the psalmist's words, "I have cried to the Lord with all my voice, and breathed his last." The 2 years later, on 6th July 1228, he was canonized. May God bless you all.